Usually when we look at a government system, you expect a certain level of, let's call it bureaucratic boredom. You expect the budgets to be dry, the goals to be public service, the math to be, well, boring.
Right. You expect the numbers to balance even if they aren't exciting.
Exactly. But I have been staring at this stack of documents from Alabama for the last 2 days. We're talking financial reports, court filings, contracts, all about the Department of Corrections. And boring is the absolute last word I'd use. It feels less like a government agency and more like a distressed private equity asset that's trying to squeeze juice out of a stone.
That is a surprisingly accurate comparison. What you're looking at isn't just a government department. It's a complex, multi-billion-dollar ecosystem. Sociologists and economists actually have a term for it: the punishment economy.
The punishment economy.
It fits, doesn't it? And that's really our mission for this deep dive. We aren't just looking at crime and punishment in some, philosophical sense. We are following the money.
We're going to look at revenue streams, corporate monopolies, and all this financial maneuvering that turns the correction system into a business.
And we're using the Alabama Department of Corrections, the ADRC, as our case study specifically.
Right. So why Alabama?
Because the documentation coming out of there right now is just incredibly revealing. Between their own FY 2024 financial reports, legislative contract reviews, some ongoing federal litigation, the curtain has really been pulled back.
We can actually see the machinery.
Yes.
Okay, so let's get into that machinery. We've kind of broken this down into 3 financial pillars based on the sources: labor, healthcare, and communication. And I want to start with labor, because this is where the math really started to break my brain.
You're talking about Alabama Correctional Industries, or ACI.
Right, ACI. So this is the division that runs the factories inside the prisons. Now, the common knowledge, the thing everyone thinks they know, is that prison labor is this massive profit engine because the labor costs are, essentially zero.
That's the assumption. You have a captive workforce, you pay them pennies, or in some cases in Alabama, nothing at all. So the profit margin should be huge.
It should be a license to print money.
It should be.
But according to the 2024 strategic plan, they aren't printing money.
No.
They're losing it.
It's so counterintuitive, isn't it? In fiscal year 2024, ACI actually operated at a net loss of nearly $790,000.
I need you to explain this to me like I'm 5. How do you lose almost $1 million when you don't have a real payroll?
Well, it speaks to a staggering level of operational inefficiency. When you dig into the line items, it's not a uniform loss. It's a story of kind of winners and losers inside the walls.
Okay.
For example, the clothing plants, they did fine. They cleared about $477,000 in profit. The printing division, the mattress factory, also in the black.
Okay, so making uniforms and mattresses works. Where is all the money going?
The vehicle tag plant.
The license plates, of course. The absolute cliche of prison labor.
The cliche itself. That single plant lost over $713,000.
That seems almost impossible.
Yeah.
Is it raw materials? Is it like machinery upkeep?
It's likely a combination of everything: outdated equipment, poor management, supply chain issues. But it gets even stranger.
Oh.
Did you catch the line item for furniture restoration?
I did, and I circled it in red pen. It listed negative revenue. Not a loss on the bottom line, but negative revenue.
Over $200,000 in negative revenue.
Which implies
What?
that they paid people to take the furniture away.
It's a major anomaly. I mean, even the ADOC's own report flagged it. They called it a major analytical red flag requiring further investigation.
Wow.
It suggests the internal accounting is just so messy they might be counting refunds or botched orders as negative income. But the takeaway is clear. The slave labor model inside the prison walls is actually bleeding cash for the state.
Okay, so the internal factories are a disaster.
Yeah.
But here's the pivot. Because while the internal factories are burning cash, the external program is a gold mine.
The work release program.
This is where inmates are sent out into the community to work for private employers. Fast food, poultry processing, you name it.
Correct. And the contrast here is just stark. While the license plate factory burns money, the work release program generated over $11.2 million in just the first 11 months of FY 2024.
And that money's paid directly to the ADOC.
Directly.
So if I'm the ADOC commissioner, I'm looking at these 2 spreadsheets. One says license plates minus $700K. The other says work release plus $11 million. The incentive structure just shifts dramatically.
It does. And the language in the source documents reflects that shift. They don't just talk about work release as rehabilitation or skills training. They explicitly call it a significant financial opportunity, and a major financial asset.
That's the key phrase right there, asset. It turns a human being into a revenue-generating unit.
Exactly. And notice the efficiency difference. When the state tries to run the factory, the license plates, they fail. When they simply lease the labor to the private sector, they profit.
It creates a dynamic where the state is incentivized to become a labor broker rather than a manufacturer.
Right.
But there's a dark side to that. If the department relies on that $11 million to balance its books, do they really want those workers to go home?
That is the uncomfortable question, and we'll come back to that perverse incentive later. But first, we have to look at the other side of the ledger. If labor is where they try to make money, health care is where they spend it.
And this is where the numbers get really, really big. We're talking about a contract worth over $1 billion. $1 billion. Awarded to a company called YesCare.
Formerly known as Corizon. And that name change isn't just a rebranding exercise, it's crucial to understanding the legal gymnastics at play here.
Okay, so this brings us to the Texas two-step. Now, I've heard this term in bankruptcy law contexts, usually with companies trying to shed massive liabilities. What is it doing in prison healthcare?
It's the same playbook. Corizon was facing a mountain of lawsuits. We're talking allegations of poor care, inmate deaths, understaffing. So they used this bankruptcy maneuver, the Texas two-step. You essentially split the company in two.
Okay, let me see if I have this right. You put all the good stuff, the contracts, the assets, the revenue into a new company, YesCare, and you put all the bad stuff, the lawsuits, the debts, into a separate company.
Exactly. And then that bad company declares bankruptcy. It effectively shields the operating business from the consequences of its past performance.
So YesCare is essentially Corizon with a fake mustache and glasses.
In terms of its operational DNA, yes. And despite this history and despite the fact that they were not the lowest bidder, Alabama awarded them this billion-dollar contract.
The not the lowest bidder part is what's wild to me. State procurement is usually obsessed with the lowest price. Why go with the more expensive, more controversial option?
Well, some legislators in Alabama are asking that exact question, and they found what some have called a smoking gun.
This involves the attorney, right?
Yes. There was an attorney who had been representing the ADOC, the state agency, in various lawsuits. Just weeks before this massive contract was announced, the same individual was placed on YesCare's board of advisors.
That feels like a conflict of interest 101 violation. You can't represent the buyer and then immediately join the board of the seller.
The Alabama legislature's Contract Review Committee certainly thought it smelled bad. Representative Chris England led a push to put a 45-day hold on the contract. He was grilling the ADOC representatives, basically asking, how can we trust this process?
But the contract went through eventually.
Yeah.
And now we're seeing the fallout. It's not just abstract corporate stuff. It's affecting people on the ground. I read about that fire department issue.
This is where the rubber meets the road. There were reports of YesCare failing to pay local invoices. In one case, a local Alabama fire department that responds to emergencies at the prison just wasn't getting paid for their services.
So let's trace the dollar here. The taxpayer pays the state. The state pays YesCare $1 billion. YesCare then creates a profit margin by stiffing the local fire department. So the taxpayer pays twice.
Essentially, yes. And that's before we even talk about mortality rates. Alabama has some of the highest prison mortality rates in the country, 222 deaths in 2022 alone.
Wow.
So when you hire a vendor with a track record of rising deaths at other facilities, like what was seen in Bernalillo County, it raises serious ethical questions about what that $1 billion is actually buying.
It seems to be buying liability protection, not health outcomes.
That is a very cynical but perhaps very accurate way to put it.
Okay, so we have the labor pillar making money on work release, losing it on factories. We have healthcare bleeding money into questionable contracts. Now we have to look at the third pillar, the one that arguably hits families the hardest.
The communications monopoly. Phones, tablets, and mail.
Most people listening probably think, okay, inmates can make calls, maybe it costs a bit more, but I don't think they realize why it costs more. We need to define site commissions.
Site commission is the polite, bureaucratic term for what is, in plain English, a legal kickback.
A kickback.
Here's how it works. A telecom company, like an IC Solutions or a Securus, goes to the Department of Corrections. They want the exclusive contract to be the only phone provider. And to win that contract, they don't say, we'll offer the cheapest rate.
They say the opposite.
Right. They say, we will charge the inmates and their families significantly more, and we will give you, the Department of Corrections, a percentage of every dollar we charge.
So the state is actually incentivized to pick the provider that charges the most because their cut is bigger.
Precisely. Historically, these commissions have gone as high as 80%. In Alabama right now, the sources indicate the ADOC receives between $300,000 and $350,000
Every single month.
every single month.
In these revenue shares. That's over $4 million a year. And that money isn't coming from the tax base. It's coming from...
It's coming from the families. It's coming from mothers, wives, children who are putting money on the books just so they can talk to their loved one. It is effectively a hidden tax on the poorest families in the state, all to subsidize the prison budget.
Now, I know the SEC, the federal regulators, have been trying to fight this for a while.
They have. Under the Martha Wright Reed Act, the FCC is trying to cap these rates and eliminate the site commission kickbacks. They argue it's predatory and that it actually hurts public safety because maintaining family ties is the #1 factor in reducing recidivism.
Right. If you can't talk to your family, you're more likely to reoffend when you get out.
Exactly. But Alabama is fighting back. The Attorney General is in federal court right now arguing to preserve these payments. Their argument is that the money is necessary to cover security costs associated with monitoring the calls.
But wait, if the vendor provides the technology to record and monitor the calls, which they do, what security cost does the state actually have?
That is the exact counter-argument consumer advocates make. They say the security cost argument is just a smokescreen to protect a revenue stream.
And it's not just phones anymore, is it? This brings us to the all-in-one concept.
This is where it gets dystopian. We're seeing huge corporate consolidation. You have companies like TKC Holdings, which is owned by a private equity firm, HIG Capital. They own the phone provider, IC Solutions. They also own the commissary and food service provider, Keefe Group.
So one single company feeds you, sells you snacks, and controls your phone calls.
It's the vertical integration of incarceration. And the 2024 RFP from Alabama doubles down on this. They want a single vendor to control phones, video visitation, and this is the new part mail scanning.
Explain mail scanning. Because when I hear that, I think of an X-ray machine looking for contraband.
No, this is different. This is digitizing the mail. Instead of getting a physical letter or a drawing from your child, the mail goes to an off-site processing center. It gets scanned. The inmate never touches the paper. They view a digital copy on a tablet.
A tablet that they probably have to pay to use.
A tablet that charges for usage, yes, and often charges for digital stamps to send a reply. It completely monetizes the mail.
And what happens if you have a dispute? Or if the contract ends?
That's the kicker. The courts have generally ruled that inmates have no property rights to that digital data. If the tablet is confiscated or the vendor changes, all those photos, all those messages, all the music you purchased,
Gone.
it's all gone. It's a pay-to-play existence where you own absolutely nothing.
It creates a complete capture of the user. They can't switch providers. They can't opt out.
And when you have that much money flowing through a system with a captive audience and very little oversight, well, it opens the door for good old-fashioned corruption.
Which brings us to the cautionary tale from right next door, Mississippi.
Operation Mississippi Hustle.
It sounds like a movie title, but it was very real.
It was. A few years ago, Chris Epps, the commissioner of the Mississippi Department of Corrections, was taken down in a massive bribery scandal. He took about $2 million in bribes.
And who was bribing him?
The vendors. People tied to the commissary companies, the phone companies.
So walk me through the mechanics. Was it just cash and envelopes?
It was cash, it was mortgage payments on his house, it was luxury condos. In exchange, Epps would steer these lucrative no-bid contracts, the phone monopolies, the commissary deals, to those specific vendors.
But here's the thing that strikes me. In Mississippi, Epps took the money personally and he went to jail. In Alabama, via the Site Commission, the department takes the money officially, and it's state policy.
That is the profound insight. The mechanism is almost identical. The vendor pays a premium to secure a monopoly. The cost is passed on to the inmate's family. In Mississippi, that premium went to Chris Epps' bank account. In Alabama, it goes to the ADOC's budget.
One is illegal corruption. The other is just revenue generation.
But the economic result for the families and the quality of service for the inmates is exactly the same. Prices go up, quality goes down because there's no competition.
So let's zoom out. We've looked at the labor, the healthcare, the phones, the corruption risks. When you put all these pieces together, what does the punishment economy actually look like in 2024?
It looks like a system that is at war with its own stated purpose.
How so?
Well, think about the incentives we've just described. The state loses money on its own inefficient operations. It relies on the revenue from work release and phone commissions to plug its budget holes.
So if the Department of Corrections were to suddenly become wildly successful at its job, if they rehabilitated everyone and the prison population dropped by 50%,
Their budget would collapse. They would lose millions in work release fees. They'd lose millions in phone commissions. They would lose the headcount utility of that billion-dollar healthcare contract.
so the financial health of the department is inversely correlated with the success of the inmates.
Exactly. A successful rehabilitation is a revenue loss. A recidivist, someone who comes back to prison, is a customer returning to the ecosystem.
That's terrifying. It suggests the system is designed to sustain itself, rather than solve the problem of crime.
That is the big structural takeaway. As long as we allow corrections departments to commercialize the people they hold, to treat them as revenue streams instead of liabilities, we will always have this fundamental conflict of interest.
And we didn't even touch on the data aspect deeply, but you mentioned it.
Right. As we move to tablets and digital mail, these companies are collecting massive amounts of data. Voice biometrics, financial patterns, social networks. In the data economy, that information is the new oil. And right now, no one is asking who owns that data or how it will be sold next.
Well, on that cheerful note, this has been a heavy one, but I think it's necessary. When we hear about prison reform, we usually think about sentencing laws or death penalty debates. We rarely think about the accounts receivable department.
But that's where the real leverage often hides. If you want to change the system, you have to understand who is getting paid.
Absolutely. Listeners, we have linked the full financial reports, the YesCare contract details, and the breakdown of the site commissions in the show notes. If you want to see the negative revenue on furniture for yourself, it's all there.
It's worth a look. The numbers don't lie, even when they're confusing.
Thanks for diving in with us. We'll see you on the next one.
Take care.